Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing the book adaptation wishlist tag. Now this is something that is totally up my alley. Like I've mentioned before, I'm also planning a book to movie adaptation discussion to make a whole video about that and sort of the processes behind it. So this is the perfect tag for me, so let's just get stuck into it. The first category is movies. Now as you can imagine, I have quite a few answers for this. Firstly, and probably most prominently, is The Drowning of Arthur Braxton by Caroline Smales. I think this is actually being made into a film by a YouTuber. I'm not entirely sure about that, but I'm a little bit apprehensive about that if that is true, but this needs to have a film. I think this could totally be a very artistic, independent style film. This is such a brilliant concept for a book. If you haven't read this, by the way, I totally recommend that you do, but this totally needs its own film. Next, I don't actually know why this hasn't been made into a film, but that's Trumpet by Jackie Kay, which is the story of a trumpet player called Joss Moody, and he dies suddenly, and his wife Millie has to deal with the grief along with their son, and then the press gets a hold of the fact that Joss was actually a woman, and they have to deal with that. It's set in Scotland. It would be such a brilliant film. Again, definitely sort of an independent style film. At a time when we're talking about the minority groups a lot in society, this is a film that needs to be made. This book was written in 1998. Jackie Kay completely nails the concept of transgender and transsexual and what it means in society, and it's a concept that people still aren't grasping in 2016, and I think a film would really help that. In a sort of similar vein, if we're talking about more popular topics at the moment. Another book that I would really like to see into a film, I don't actually have a copy of, but it's Asking for It by Louise O'Neill, which I read I think in February. It's a really interesting depiction of rape culture. It's a very unflinching, harsh reality. I got so frustrated and angry at characters that didn't even exist, which is exactly what Louise was trying to do. It's one thing for me to talk about these things, but I sort of live in my own little bubble and I'm sort of accepting of all, but then in the real world that is not the case whatsoever, and therefore I think that things like this really do need to be made. I think it's a book that speaks volumes, and I think it's a film that is so necessary, and it would just be so eye-opening to so many people. Next is a new-ish historical fiction that I absolutely loved, and I would imagine this is going to be made into a film, but that's The Butcher's Hook by Janet Ellis. I mean, you probably already know loads about this, but I think this would make such a good historical fiction film. The cinematography of this film could be so good, and I really hope this is made into a film. I'm sure it's going to be, definitely. It's got to be. It's so good. Lastly is a crime book that I think would be made into a really interesting, disturbing style film if it was done in the right sort of way, and that's Monsters by Emerald Fennell. I love the setting of this, by the sea. It's in a seaside town in England, and these are two horrid children, and I think if you could get the right child actors to do this, there's a few murders going on, and these children are really horrible children. They're so horrible to everybody. They're weird and creepy and disturbing, and I just think they'd be played so well. I think this could be quite a disturbing, gruesome, gory film if they talk about the deaths well. I don't know, like as I was reading it, I could totally picture the setting, the cinematography and the mise-en-scène of the seaside. I think it would be so good. The next category is TV shows, and I don't watch a lot of TV, but one thing that I absolutely adored that the BBC did a few years ago is Black Mirror. So each series had 3 sort of long episodes, a little bit like how they do Sherlock, and they were very disturbing concepts. I think it's such a clever idea for a TV show, and I think the same thing could be done with a really good short story collection. So any really, but specifically I would say The Rental Heart. There are a couple of stories in here which I would absolutely love to see sort of a 1.5 hour episode within like a series, sort of exactly like Black Mirror. I don't think it's ever happened that a short story collection has actually been created into a film or a TV series, and I think that it's something that should happen. Next is graphic novel, and I've only got one answer for this, and it's actually something I'm reading at the moment, and that is the children's book Wildwood by Colin Meloy, with the illustrations by Carson Ellis. It's just over 650 pages, I believe. But the illustrations that Carson Ellis do all the way through, I want to see as a graphic novel. I don't read graphic novels pretty much ever. I don't think I've ever read one. I'd like to. I have nothing against them. The illustrations in this need to be their own graphic novel. I think they're so beautiful. They're a little bit creepy but also quite cute. It's just that strange divide. I don't know if Carson Ellis does any graphic novels, but if you know anything about him, please let me know down below, because I will definitely pick up any of his work, because I absolutely love the illustrations in this book. Next is plays, and again, as you can imagine, I have quite a few answers for this. First of all, Ali Smith's Other Stories and Other Stories. In this there is a story called The Hanging Girl, and I can imagine it being the best minimalistic play ever. The short story is essentially about a woman that keeps walking around places and seeing this girl hanging behind her from a tree, and she decides to take her down and take her home, and sort of lives with her, and it's very disturbing, and this girl is depicted quite gruesomely, but I can imagine sort of the play opening and there's just a girl hanging from the ceiling. I think that would be such a dramatic opening to a play, and sort of this woman pulling her down and taking her home and looking after her. I just think it would make such a good play. Definitely sort of one of those an hour and 10-minute plays with no interval, and you just have to experience it all in one go. I think it would be so amazing. I think it's something Tom Stoppard could write. Ali Smith, writes her own plays. The Seer is a brilliant play, and I think she could write an excellent version of this, but I totally can imagine it as a really clever Tom Stoppard play. But yeah, that's something that I would love to see. Maybe I should write it myself. Who knows? Next is something that I read quite recently, and again in a similar vein, a very minimalistic style play, and that's The Dinner by Herman Koch. I can imagine it being one of those one-room plays where it all stays in the same place, a little bit like Streetcar Named Desire or something like that, with just the restaurant set up, with the table right at the front with the 4 chairs and the 4 characters sitting on it. When they watch the videos, obviously they do move out of that within the book, but it's pretty much solely set in the restaurant, but they do watch the videos and the news, and I can imagine them being projected sort of onto the back wall for the audience to see. I just think it would make such an interesting play. This is a book that I could also imagine being a film, but I just think it'd be really interesting to try and see this as a play, and that's One by Sarah Crossan. This is actually free verse. The whole thing is written in free verse, but it's about 2 conjoined twins, and I don't think there's ever been a play written about conjoined twins, and I would love to see one. They're 2 young girls, and they realise that they might actually have to get separated, and as you know, when conjoined twins get separated, because they sometimes share organs, one of them often, if not both, don't survive. I feel like it's something that I would love to see sort of right in front of me happening, so I could completely feel the emotions that were felt, because I think the way it's written in free verse is very clever, because it read so fluently and I was completely engrossed in the story, and that narrative is something that would work really well with a live audience, I think. And finally is something that I think would be quite a difficult feat, but again something that I'd really like to see tried in a play format, and that is Bodies of Water by V.H. Leslie. I think this is something that would need quite a lot of scenery, quite a lot of special effects, you know, a big production, but it's set in 2 different time periods. We're set in the 1800s and then the present day, so I almost can imagine like the sides of the stage are sort of split, and one half is 1800s and one half is the present day, and they sort of overlap with each other as they do in the novel. That would need quite a lot of planning and a lot of thinking, but just think it would make such an interesting live action play. And finally is musicals. Now, I absolutely adore musicals. I don't really have a lot of books that I would think would make good musicals, but something that I actually went to see at Christmas, which was sort of a musical, so I'm going to include it, but I'd like an even bigger musical, is The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. I saw this created by the same people that did Warhorse, so they had a huge Aslan puppet thing. It was incredible, and it had a lot of songs in it that I loved. They were original, it was an original score, and I thought it was brilliant, but I just love to see a soul musical based on this. It's that sort of magical element that's also sort of a bit like Northern Lights, and I think Northern Lights in a way would work as a really interesting musical. It'd be strange, don't get me wrong, but I don't know, I can totally imagine this being like a full-on musical. I loved what I saw, but I just think it would be taken to the next level and just made into this huge production. I would absolutely love that. Recently it seems to be the case that more alternative or disturbing even books have been made into musicals. For example, Matt Smith was recently in American Psycho the musical. Although this book isn't disturbing, it's sort of that strange alternative book, and I think All My Friends Are Superheroes would make an amazing musical. There are times in this book where just individual superheroes are depicted, and I can imagine those being sort of verses in this big song about superheroes, and sort of the wedding at the start where Tom gets his girlfriend taken off him by Hypno could be really hilarious song, you know, a really funny musical. But I think it would make such a clever musical. So I think that is everything. Thank you all so much for watching. I will tag a few people, I'll link them in the description box below, so have a look and see if you're tagged. But if anybody wants to do this, I think this is an absolutely amazing tag, so feel free to be tagged by me. If you have any comments on anything that I've just shown, please let me know down below. Or tell me your favourite book to movie adaptation. I hope you all have a lovely week and enjoy the sun if you're living in England. I absolutely hate the sun, so I'm going straight back inside and back to bed because as soon as I see the sun, I burn. I shall see you in my next video.